My coworker blackmailed me into sending my best friend back to her abuser, so I destroyed his life and got her out. 2 years later, he's back knocking at my door. Back when I was a nurse, it was hard to find a staff member who wasn't an effing beach. One time, my husband came to our staff party as my +1. I saw multiple of the girls try to flirt with him. He told me one of them even told him, "You know you'd have a better time with me." Like, who even says something like that? So when I met Sakura, a newbie who was extremely kind and empathetic, I was ultra grateful. She was a small Japanese woman, one who was kind and smiled a lot. When I told her I loved sushi, she brought in an entire roll of homemade California rolls that she had made just for me, and half of the paramedics were practically in love with her, because she would bring in homemade personalized lunchboxes for them, all filled with their favorite types of food. I honestly don't know how she did it. Needless to say, we were all very protective of her. When the nurses would steal my food from the cubicles or spread rumors about me around the hospital, I couldn't care less. But Sakura? That was a different story. One time this girl called Claire, who was the exact opposite of Sakura, tried to spread a rumor that Sakura was the comfort woman for the paramedics, which is why they loved her so much. This rumor was particularly evil. You see, the comfort women were Japanese women who were kidnapped during World War II and abused by dozens of soldiers a day for pleasure. So when she came to me crying with what she had heard Claire said, I bit back. I didn't want any patients to get harmed during our feud, so I waited until our staff training day at a separate location. In the morning, when everyone had dropped their lunches off at their cubicles, I went on a bathroom break. But really, I snuck in and shoved the remnants of a crushed laxative into her sandwich. Lol. Fast forward an hour later when our manager was talking. Suddenly one of the nurses screamed, "Oh my gosh, what the heck?" halfway across the room. I looked over and Claire had shit herself so much her scrubs were soaking with the forbidden brown river. It was going down her legs. It was even filling her shoes. She ran out, and after that, no one took her rumors seriously anymore. I think the most heartbreaking part was that through it all, whenever anyone made jokes about it, Sakura would always try to shut it down, to tell them accidents can happen to anyone. She truly had the most golden heart I'd ever met. So one day, when she came in with a black eye, I was pushing her for answers, because there's no way she got into a fight. We were with the paramedics when I asked, and when she didn't answer, I forced them to get involved so she'd finally spill. Guys, I just walked into a glass door. I'm just clumsy sometimes, you know me. Well, Sakura was a woman of many talents, but lying was not one of them. The entire room went silent, but I pretended to believe her. OMG, that's so funny. Was your boyfriend there when it happened? She gulped and her face turned ghost white. Yes, kind of. Not really, she stammered, before immediately changing topic. But me and the paramedics weren't buying it. We glanced at each other and I knew they wanted to do something about this just as much as I did. One of the guys managed to swiftly switch the topic to the 4th of July, and Sakura chimed in, "Oh, that's something I've never really celebrated. Let's have a barbecue at your house." James immediately interrupted her. He was taking advantage of her because he knew she was too nice to say no, but it was for her own good. So fast forward to the day, we all hopped in the car with liquor and beer bottles in our hands, out for blood. As they all forced their way into Sakura's home, I couldn't help but smile. All the paramedics are 6 foot or above, and all of them are very muscular, so the look on her boyfriend's face was priceless. It was like an insect looking at the bottom of a shoe, knowing death is imminent. One of them, Luke, grabbed his shoulder and playfully shook him. "Hey, hope you don't mind us being here, buddy." I could see the panic in his face, but when he turned to lock eyes with Sakura, that panic turned to anger. She shook her head, as if to say no, I didn't tell them, and he breathed a sigh of relief. I wanted to clock him right then and there, but I knew we had to play the long game. As the day went on, I noticed James was handing bottle after bottle to her boyfriend. Meanwhile, all the paramedics were drinking 0% beer, so after just a few hours, he was drunk, like stumbling everywhere, sounding like an R-word drunk. That's when he let the mask slip. Sakura got in his way by accident, and he shoved her over the coffee table before sitting back down on the sofa. That's when I heard it. Her boyfriend pleading with Luke to stop hitting him. It was actually a little satisfying, TBH. Eventually, her boyfriend promised to never do it again, so he stopped, and they broke up and he moved out the next day. That day, Sakura came to work with a huge smile on her face. I really thought it was over, but at lunchtime, I got a call. "I know what you did to Claire," a familiar male voice said without preamble. The voice was instantly recognizable. Sakura's ex-boyfriend. My sandwich turned to ash in my mouth, my appetite vanishing instantly. The break room suddenly felt too exposed, too public, though I was still alone. I could hear the distant sounds of the hospital, call bells, voices, the squeak of cartwheels on linoleum, but they seemed far away, as though I was hearing them through water. My blood ran cold as I recognized Sakura's ex-boyfriend. "I have the security footage from your training day. You poisoned her food. I wonder what the nursing board would think about that." His voice had a smug satisfaction to it, the words carefully chosen to maximize their impact. I could almost see his self-satisfied smirk through the phone, the same expression he'd worn when shoving Sakura. My mind raced. The training center had security cameras. I'd never considered that. The realization hit me like a physical blow, my stomach dropping as I mentally retraced my steps that day. Had I really been so careless? So focused on revenge that I hadn't noticed the small black domes in the ceiling corners? I remembered the layout of the room, the position of the cubbies, trying desperately to recall if there had been cameras in that area. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My hand gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I hunched over the table as though making myself smaller could somehow protect me from the threat. The sandwich lay forgotten, the break room suddenly feeling like a trap rather than a sanctuary. "I want Sakura back, and you're going to help me, or this video goes to your boss, the police, and the nursing board. Your career will be over." His His tone was matter-of-fact, as though he was discussing the weather rather than destroying someone's life. There was no emotion in his voice, just cold calculation. This wasn't about love or even possession. It was about control, about winning. I felt sick. The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the smell of hospital disinfectant overwhelming. My scrubs felt tight around my throat, and I tugged at the collar, trying to breathe. She won't listen to me. The words came out weak, a pathetic attempt at resistance that we both knew wouldn't stand. Make her listen, he hissed. You've got 3 days. The line went dead before I could respond, leaving me sitting alone in the break room with the weight of his threat crushing down on me. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the steady tick of the wall clock counting down the seconds of my 3-day deadline. After hanging up, I sat frozen in the break room. How could I betray Sakura like this? But my career, my livelihood, everything I'd worked for would be destroyed. Years of education, countless nights studying for exams, the student loans I was still paying off. All of it gone because of one impulsive act of revenge. The implications spiraled in my mind, not just losing my job, potentially facing criminal charges, being unable to work in healthcare ever again, the public humiliation of everyone knowing what I'd done. I needed help, but I couldn't tell the paramedics. They'd likely do something that would land them in jail. Luke especially had a protective streak that bordered on dangerous when it came to people he cared about. I'd seen the look in his eyes when he confronted Sakura's boyfriend. There was a capacity for violence there that scared me. If I told him about the blackmail, there was no telling what he might do. Our plan started with a burner phone. Miguel, another paramedic who hadn't been at the barbecue, bought one with cash at a convenience store miles from the hospital. He was shorter than the others but built like a tank, with quick hands and a quicker mind. He'd grown up in a rough neighborhood and knew how to move under the radar, skills that proved invaluable now. We need to get this to her somehow, I whispered as we huddled in the ambulance bay. The concrete loading area was relatively private, shielded from the main hospital by the ambulances parked in their designated spots. The afternoon sun hit down on the pavement, creating waves of heat that distorted the air around us. He's checking her personal phone, monitoring her calls and texts. Luke nodded grimly. And we need to document everything. Every bruise, every threat. His face was set in hard lines, his usual easygoing manner replaced by a focused intensity. He leaned against the ambulance, arms crossed over his chest, his paramedic uniform dark with sweat in the summer heat. I'll handle that part, I said. She trusts me, even after. Everything. The words stuck in my throat, the guilt of my betrayal making it difficult to speak. I had told Sakura I needed to talk to her boyfriend, that he was threatening to expose something about me. I hadn't given her the details, but I'd made it clear that I needed her to see him again. The look of confusion and hurt on her face had been almost unbearable. James looked skeptical. Does she, though? You're the reason she's back with that monster. His words stung, but they were true. He didn't sugarcoat it, didn't offer false comfort. His honesty was both painful and necessary, a reminder of the gravity of what I had done. The sun glinted off his badge, momentarily blinding me as he shifted his weight. That's why I have to fix this. I squared my shoulders, determined to make this right no matter what it took. The guilt was a physical weight in my chest, making it hard to breathe in the humid air of the ambulance bay. But determination was stronger than guilt, and I would use that to fuel what needed to be done. The next day, I watched Sakura carefully. She moved like a ghost through the hospital, keeping her head down, avoiding conversation. Her usual cheerful greetings were absent, replaced by silent nods as she passed colleagues in the hallway. The dark circles under her eyes suggested she hadn't been sleeping, and she flinched at loud noises, the clatter of a dropped instrument, a door closing too forcefully. When she reached for a patient chart, I noticed fingerprint bruises on her wrist. My stomach clenched at the sight of the purple marks against her pale skin, partially hidden by the sleeve of her scrubs but visible when she reached up. She quickly tugged the fabric down when she caught me looking, her eyes darting away in shame or fear or both. During lunch, I managed to get her alone in the supply closet. The small room was cramped with shelves of medical supplies, the air stuffy and smelling of plastic and disinfectant. The door closed behind us with a soft click, sealing us in the windowless space where the fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on her tired face. How bad is it? I asked quietly, keeping my voice low despite the privacy. The walls in hospitals were thin, and gossip traveled faster than any disease. I stood between her and the door, not blocking it exactly, but making it clear this conversation wasn't optional. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Worse than before, he doesn't trust me now. Checks my phone, my emails, drives me to and from work. Her voice dropped even lower. He won't let me talk to anyone outside of work. Says if I tell anyone, he'll send the video. Her hands twisted together nervously, the bruises on her wrists stark against her skin in the harsh lighting. We're going to get you out, I promised, but we need evidence first. I showed her the burner phone, quickly explaining our plan. The phone was a basic model, nothing fancy, just a small black rectangle with physical buttons instead of a touchscreen. It looked ancient compared to modern smartphones, but that was part of its appeal. Simple, untraceable, reliable. Her eyes widened. Hide this somewhere he won't find it. Document everything. Take photos of any injuries, record conversations if you can do it safely. Text everything to this number. I showed her James's burner contact. Delete the messages after sending. I demonstrated how to access the deleted messages folder and clear that too, leaving no digital trail. She hesitated, then took the phone with trembling hands, tucking it into her bra. The small device disappeared beneath her scrub top, hidden against her skin where it would be difficult to detect. Her hands shook slightly as she adjusted her clothing, making sure nothing looked out of place. What if he finds it? Her voice was barely audible, her fear palpable in the small space. A bead of sweat trickled down her temple despite the cool air of the supply closet, her breathing shallow and quick with anxiety. Say a patient gave it to you. You were going to turn it in to lost and found. The lie sounded weak even to my ears, but it was the best we could come up with on short short notice. The important thing was giving her a lifeline, a way to communicate with us that he couldn't monitor or control. She nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Just hold on a little longer, I whispered. We're going to fix this. I squeezed her shoulder gently, trying to convey confidence and reassurance I didn't entirely feel. The plan had too many variables, too many things that could go wrong, but it was all we had. For the next week, Sakura sent us photos and texts documenting her living hell. Bruises on her arms and back, a split lip she had to cover with makeup, text screenshots where he threatened her, audio recordings of his drunken rants. Each new piece of evidence made my guilt heavier. I'd put her in this situation. Every new bruise, every frightened message was a direct result of my actions. The weight of that responsibility was crushing. The evidence accumulated on James's burner phone, a digital record of abuse that was both heartbreaking and infuriating. We created a secure cloud backup of everything, ensuring that even if the phones were discovered or destroyed, the evidence would remain. Each day, I checked in with Sakura as casually as possible at work. Our brief conversations in supply closets or empty patient rooms, the only chance to make sure she was still okay. Meanwhile, I was doing my own investigation. I needed to find out how he got that security footage from the training day. The facility had cameras, sure, but how did he access them? The training center was a separate entity from the hospital, with its own security protocols and staff. Getting footage would require authorization, paperwork, a reason. It wasn't something a random person could just request. I called the training center, posing as hospital administration doing a security audit. The phone rang several times before someone picked up, the hold music cutting off mid-melody. We had an incident during our last training day, I explained to the manager, keeping my voice professional and authoritative. I'm checking who has access to your security footage. I paced my living room as I spoke, the cordless phone pressed to my ear, my free hand fidgeting nervously with a pen. Just our security team and management, the woman replied. Her voice was bored, reciting information she'd given many times before. I could hear papers shuffling in the background, the click of computer keys as she multitasked during our conversation. Though we did have a request from one of your staff members recently, said they lost something and wanted to check the footage. My heart raced. Do you remember who? I gripped the phone tighter, holding my breath as I waited for her answer. The pen in my hand snapped, ink staining my fingers, but I barely noticed. Let me check. Yes, a Claire Wilson. She came by personally with a signed form from your hospital. The manager's voice remained casual, unaware of the bombshell she'd just dropped. More clicking sounds came through the line as she continued whatever work I'd interrupted. Claire, of course. She must have suspected someone tampered with her food and went looking for proof. Then somehow, Sakura's ex got it from her. The connection was obvious in retrospect. Claire's humiliation and Sakura's happiness occurring simultaneously would have created the perfect storm of resentment and opportunity. But how did they connect? What was the missing link between them? I needed to find out how they were connected. During my next shift, I casually approached one of the nurses who was friends with Claire. We were in the supply room, restocking gauze and alcohol wipes for the upcoming shift. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a slightly greenish tint that made even the most vibrant colors look sickly. Haven't seen Claire hanging out with her usual crowd lately, I commented while we restocked supplies. I kept my tone casual, just making conversation to pass the time as we filled bins with packaged sterile supplies. My hands moved automatically, sorting and organizing while my mind focused entirely on gathering information. The nurse rolled her eyes. She's been spending all her time with that new boyfriend. Some creep she met at a bar. He's always hanging around waiting for her after shifts. She lowered her voice conspiratorially, leaning closer as though sharing a juicy piece of gossip rather than a warning sign. Shows up unannounced, checks her phone when she's not looking. Total weirdo. Oh, what's he like? I continued sorting supplies, trying to appear only mildly interested while my heart hammered in my chest. The pieces were starting to fit together, forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. The connection between Claire and Sakura's ex was becoming clearer with each word. Controlling, always checking her phone, asking who she's talking to. Red flags everywhere, but she doesn't see it. The nurse shook her head, genuinely concerned despite her gossipy tone. She thinks it's romantic how protective he is. I tried to tell her it's not normal, but she won't listen. She sighed, closing a cabinet with more force than necessary, the metal door clanging against the frame. A chill ran down my spine. It couldn't be a coincidence. That afternoon, I waited in my car in the hospital parking lot until Claire's shift ended. The summer sun hit down on my windshield, turning my car into an oven despite the shade I'd tried to park in. I sank low in my seat, adjusting the visor to block my face from view while maintaining sight of the hospital entrance. Sure enough, a familiar car pulled up, Sakura's ex, the same model and color I'd seen parked outside her apartment, now idling in the pickup zone with the driver hunched over his phone. Claire climbed in, and they drove away. She looked different than she had at work, her posture less confident, her movements more hesitant as she slid into the passenger seat. Even from a distance, I could see how she shrank into herself when he spoke to her. The pieces clicked into place. He'd been dating Claire to get the video, using her to spy on Sakura at work. No wonder Claire had spread that vicious rumor about Sakura being a comfort woman. He was probably feeding her lies, manipulating her insecurities and jealousies to serve his own agenda. Claire wasn't just a mean girl. She was another victim, another woman being controlled and used by the same man. I texted James immediately. Claire is dating Sakura's ex. He's using her to spy on us. My fingers trembled as I typed, the implications of this discovery sending waves of anxiety through my body. This wasn't just about Sakura anymore. It was bigger, more complicated, with more people at risk. His response came quickly. This changes everything. Meet at my place tonight, 8 p.m. The message was brief, but loaded with urgency. If he was dating Claire to spy on Sakura, who knew what other connections he had, what other information he might be gathering? The situation was escalating beyond what any of us had anticipated. When I arrived at James's apartment, Luke and Miguel were already there, along with a woman I didn't recognize. James's apartment was small but tidy, with mismatched furniture that somehow worked together. The living room walls were painted a deep blue, making the space feel feel smaller but more intimate. The four of them were gathered around a coffee table covered with papers, phones, and half-empty coffee mugs. "This is my sister, Vanessa," James explained. "She's a lawyer." Vanessa was tall like her brother, with the same intense eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She wore a tailored blazer despite the casual setting, her hair pulled back in a severe ponytail that emphasized her sharp features. Vanessa nodded at me. "James told me what's happening. What you're describing is textbook coercive control and blackmail." Her voice was crisp and professional, cutting straight to the point without preamble. She gestured to the papers spread across the coffee table, printouts of laws and legal precedents, highlighted sections of text that meant nothing to me but clearly supported whatever strategy she was formulating. "Can we go to the police?" I asked, hope flickering briefly before her expression extinguished it. I perched on the edge of an armchair, too tense to sit back comfortably. The room felt too warm despite the air conditioning humming quietly in the background. She shook her head. "The video complicates things. You committed a crime, even if it was minor. And if he releases it, your career is over." Her bluntness was both refreshing and terrifying. No sugarcoating, no false reassurances, just the cold reality of our situation laid bare. My heart sank. The weight of my actions pressed down on me, the consequences extending far beyond what I'd ever imagined when I'd crushed that laxative tablet. One impulsive act of revenge had created a cascade of consequences that now threatened not just my career, but Sakura's safety. "But," she continued, "what he's doing is much worse. Domestic violence, blackmail, harassment. If we gather enough evidence, we can build a case against him that would make the laxative incident look like nothing." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "No judge or jury would care about your minor food tampering in the face of systematic abuse and blackmail. We have photos and recordings," Luke said, pulling out his phone to show her. He scrolled through the images Sakura had sent, the progression of bruises, the text messages, the time-stamped evidence of escalating abuse. Each swipe of his finger revealed another horror, another moment of pain captured digitally. Vanessa examined them carefully. "This is good, but we need more. We need to prove he's the one blackmailing you." She set the phone down, her expression thoughtful as she considered our options. "Right now, it's your word against his. We need something concrete that ties him directly to the blackmail attempt." "How do we do that?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the legal complexities. The stakes were so high. Sakura's safety, my career, possibly even Claire's well-being now that we knew she was involved with him too. The room seemed to shrink around me as the magnitude of the situation expanded. "Get him to incriminate himself," she said simply. "Record him admitting to the blackmail." She pulled a small device from her bag, a digital recorder no bigger than a USB drive. "This looks like a key fob, but records high-quality audio. If you can get him to admit what he's doing, we have him." The next day, Sakura didn't show up for her shift. Texted the burner phone but got no response. Panic clawed at my throat as I checked the time again and again, watching the minutes tick by with no word from her. The hospital corridors seemed longer, the lights harsher, every sound amplified by my anxiety. James and Luke exchanged worried glances when I told them. We huddled in the ambulance bay, voices low, faces grim. The summer heat created a shimmering effect over the asphalt, the air thick with humidity and tension. "We need to check on her," Luke said, his voice tight with concern. He paced the small area, unable to stand still, his tall frame radiating tension. His uniform was perfectly pressed as always, but his face showed the strain of sleepless nights and constant worry. "If we show up at their house, he'll know something's up," I argued. "He's already suspicious. If we appear without warning, he might hurt her worse." The words caught in my throat, the possibility too horrible to fully articulate. The unspoken fear hung in the air between us. What if we were already too late? "Not if we have a reason to be there," James said slowly, his eyes lighting up with an idea. "What if we do a wellness check? Say the hospital sent us because she missed work without calling in." It was a plausible excuse, one that wouldn't immediately raise suspicions. The hospital did sometimes send people to check on staff who missed shifts without notice, especially reliable employees like Sakura. It was risky, but we had no choice. James and Miguel took an ambulance while Luke and I followed in my car, parking a block away. The neighborhood was quiet in the middle of the day, most residents at work, the only sounds the distant hum of traffic and the occasional barking dog. We parked under a large oak tree, the shade providing some relief from the relentless sun while giving us a clear view of Sakura's apartment building. I watched from a distance as they knocked on the door. The paramedics looked official in their uniforms, clipboards in hand to complete the illusion of an administrative task. Sakura's ex answered, looking annoyed. Even from a distance, his body language was hostile, shoulders tense, stance wide, one hand gripping the doorframe as if physically blocking entry. I couldn't hear what was said, but his body language was defensive, blocking the doorway. James tried to look past him, saying something that made the ex even angrier. His face reddened, one hand gesturing emphatically as he argued with the paramedics. Then, for just a moment, Sakura appeared behind him. Even from a distance, I could see the dark bruise on her cheekbone. She looked thinner than she had just days ago, her posture hunched, her presence a shadow of her former self. The ex shoved her back and slammed the door in the paramedics' faces. The sound echoed across the quiet street, making me flinch despite the distance. James and Miguel stood there for a moment longer, exchanging words before reluctantly returning to their ambulance. Their faces were grim as they climbed into the vehicle, the usual easy camaraderie replaced by tense silence. James and Miguel returned to their ambulance, faces grim. "He wouldn't let us in," James reported when we regrouped. "Said Sakura had food poisoning and was sleeping. But I saw her. She looked terrified." His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white with suppressed anger. The ambulance idled quietly, the air conditioning a welcome relief from the summer heat outside. "He's escalating," Luke said quietly. "We need to move faster." His usual jovial expression was gone, replaced by a focused intensity that transformed his entire demeanor. He wasn't just a paramedic now. He was a man on a mission, determined to protect someone vulnerable from harm. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Sakura's face, the fear in her eyes. This was my fault. I had to fix it. The bedroom felt too hot despite the air conditioning, the sheets tangling around my legs as I tossed and turned. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sakura's bruised face, heard the boyfriend's threats, felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on me. The next morning, Sakura still didn't come to work. Instead, Claire approached me in the break room, a smug smile on her face. She looked different somehow, her makeup heavier than usual, her uniform more precisely pressed, as though she was performing a role rather than just coming to work. There was something brittle about her confidence, a fragility beneath the bravado that I hadn't noticed before. "Sakura quit," she announced, leaning against the counter where I was preparing my coffee. The fluorescent lights highlighted the dark circles under her eyes, poorly concealed with makeup. "Her boyfriend told me she's too stressed for this job. Isn't that sad?" Her tone was mocking, but there was something off about it, as though she was reciting lines rather than speaking naturally. I forced myself to stay calm, stirring my coffee with deliberate slowness to hide the trembling of my hands. "When did this happen?" I kept my voice neutral, casual, though my heart was racing. This was confirmation of our worst fears. He was isolating her completely, cutting off her last connections to the outside world. "Yesterday, he said she's going to stay home for a while, focus on being a better girlfriend." Claire's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. There was a hollowness to her expression, a disconnect between her words and her body language that suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with what she was saying. Guess those rumors about her weren't so far off after all. I wanted to slap the smile off her face. Instead, I nodded and walked away, texting the others as soon as I was alone. "Emergency meeting, tonight." My fingers shook as I typed, the reality of the situation hitting me with full force. Sakura wasn't just being controlled, she was being imprisoned, cut off from everyone who might help her. Time was running out. We gathered at my house this time. Vanessa was there again, along with another man she introduced as Raymond, a private investigator friend. Raymond was middle-aged with salt and pepper hair, and the kind of forgettable face that made him perfect for his profession. He wore jeans and a polo shirt, looking more like a high school teacher than someone who tracked people for a living. "He's holding Sakura prisoner," I explained, pacing the length of my living room. "She's not allowed to work anymore. We need to get her out now." My voice rose with each word, the panic I'd been suppressing all day finally breaking through. The others watched me with varying expressions of concern and determination, the gravity of the situation evident in their solemn faces. "We still need to be smart about this," Vanessa cautioned. "If we just storm in there, he'll release the video." Always the voice of reason, she sat perfectly straight on my couch, her legal pad balanced on her knee as she made notes. Her calm professionalism was both reassuring and frustrating. I wanted action, not more planning. "I don't care about the damn video anymore," I exploded. "Sakura's life is in danger." The words echoed in my small living room, hanging in the air as everyone fell silent. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the sudden quiet, marking the seconds that Sakura remained in danger. Raymond held up a hand. "I might have a solution. I did some digging on your guy. He's got a record: DUI, disorderly conduct, and a domestic violence charge that was dropped when the victim wouldn't testify." He spoke matter-of-factly, laying out the facts without emotion. A manila folder sat on the coffee table in front of him, containing printouts of criminal records and court documents he'd somehow accessed. "That's not surprising," Luke muttered, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. His expression was dark, his usual easygoing manner completely absent. The tension in his body suggested he was barely restraining himself from taking immediate action. "Here's what's interesting," Raymond continued. "He's on probation for the DUI. One condition is no alcohol. Another is no contact with known criminals." He tapped a highlighted section of one of the documents, the legal language standing out in bright yellow against the black text. "How does that help us?" I asked, momentarily pausing my pacing to look at the document. The legal terminology was dense and confusing, but the highlighted sections made the key points clear. Specific conditions that had to be met to maintain probation status. "Because Claire has a record too," Raymond said. "Petty theft 3 years ago. If his probation officer found out he's dating her, that's a violation." He pulled another document from his folder, this one showing Claire's arrest record and subsequent plea deal. The mugshot showed a younger, more vulnerable version of Claire, her makeup-free face streaked with tears. "So we report him," James said, the first to grasp the implications. He straightened from where he'd been leaning against the kitchen doorway, his expression brightening with hope for the first time in days. "Get him picked up for a probation violation, and while he's dealing with that," Raymond nodded, "and while he's dealing with that, we get Sakura out." He closed his folder, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. No confrontation, no risk to Sakura, just using the system against him. It wasn't perfect, but it was a plan. Raymond made the call to the probation department the next morning, anonymously reporting the violation. Meanwhile, I had my own idea. I called Sakura's ex directly. My hands trembled as I dialed, the phone feeling slippery in my sweaty palm. Each ring sent my heart rate higher, until I thought it might burst from my chest. "What do you want?" he growled when he answered. His voice was rough, hostile, immediately putting me on the defensive despite my determination to stay strong. In the background, I could hear a television playing, the volume too loud, suggesting he was home rather than out somewhere. "I want to make a deal," I said, keeping my voice steady through sheer force of will. "I have something you want more than Sakura." I paced my kitchen as I spoke, unable to stay still, the adrenaline making it impossible to remain in one place. "I doubt that." His tone was dismissive, but he hadn't hung up, a good sign. He was at least curious enough to keep listening, to see what I might offer that could be worth his attention. The television volume lowered slightly, indicating I had his full attention. "Money," I said simply. "I'll pay you to delete the video and leave Sakura alone." It was a gamble, assuming that greed might outweigh his desire for control, but worth trying. People like him often had a price. The trick was figuring out what it was and whether you could afford to pay it. There was a pause. "How much?" The interest in his voice was unmistakable. The prospect of cash overriding his desire to maintain control over Sakura, at least temporarily. I could almost see him calculating, weighing options, trying to determine how much he could demand. 5,000, cash, but I need to see you delete the video first. I named a figure large enough to be tempting, but not so large it would seem suspicious. $5,000 was significant. A painful amount to lose, but not impossible to gather on short notice. It had to be believable. He laughed. Make it 10. The counteroffer came quickly, suggesting he'd already been thinking about an exit strategy, a way to profit from the situation before moving on to his next victim. There was a confidence in his voice that suggested he thought he had the upper hand. Fine. Tomorrow night, the park by the river, 8 o'clock. I agreed without hesitation, knowing I needed to appear eager to resolve the situation. The park was public enough to be safe, but secluded enough for our conversation to remain private. The location was strategic, open sightlines, multiple exit routes, and close enough to a main road that help could arrive quickly if needed. Come alone, he warned, and bring the cash. The threat in his voice was clear, though unnecessary. Of course he would want me alone. Easier to intimidate, easier to control the situation. What he didn't know was that I had no intention of being truly alone. I hung up, heart pounding. I had no intention of paying him a cent, but I needed him out of the house. While he was meeting me, James, Luke, and Miguel would get Sakura. The plan was simple but effective. Divide his attention, separate him from Sakura, and use the opportunity to get her to safety. Timing would be crucial, but if everything went according to plan, Sakura would be free by tomorrow night. That night, I withdrew the money from my savings account, just in case the plan went wrong. $10,000 was nearly everything I had, but Sakura's safety was worth it. The bank teller gave me a concerned look as she counted out the large bills, probably wondering why anyone would need so much cash on short notice. I offered no explanation, simply thanking her and tucking the envelope into my purse with hands that trembled slightly from the weight of what I was doing. The next day crawled by. I kept checking my phone, waiting for news that the probation officer had visited. Nothing. Each hour felt like a year, each minute stretching into eternity as I went through the motions of my shift. I checked vital signs, administered medications, charted patient progress, all while my mind was entirely focused on the evening ahead. The familiar hospital routines felt surreal, disconnected from the high-stakes drama unfolding in my personal life. At 7:30, I drove to the park, the envelope of cash on the passenger seat. I'd insisted on going alone, despite the others' protests. This was my mess to fix. The guilt of putting Sakura in this position was mine to bear, and I was determined to be the one to make it right. The setting sun cast long shadows across the park. The trees and benches transformed into dark silhouettes against the orange sky. I waited on a bench near the river, watching the sunset. The water reflected the changing colors of the sky, from blue to orange to deep purple as twilight approached. A few joggers passed by, a couple walked their dog in the distance, but otherwise the park was quiet. The summer evening was warm, cicadas buzzing in the trees, the air heavy with humidity and the scent of water and earth. At 8 sharp, his car pulled up. He got out, looking around suspiciously before approaching me. His gaze swept the area, checking for any sign of a trap or ambush. Satisfied that I appeared to be alone, he walked toward me with a confident swagger that made my skin crawl. He wore jeans and a t-shirt, looking deceptively normal, not like someone capable of the cruelty I knew he possessed. "You got the money?" he demanded without preamble. No greeting, no small talk, straight to business. His eyes were cold, calculating, assessing me for any sign of deception or weakness. A slight breeze ruffled his hair, carrying the scent of his cologne, too strong, too artificial, making me want to step back. I patted my purse. "You got the video?" I kept my voice steady, meeting his gaze without flinching. The weight of the purse on my lap was reassuring, a reminder that I had something he wanted. The power dynamic wasn't entirely in his favor, despite what he might think. He pulled out his phone. "It's right here. But first, let me see the cash." He held the phone just out of my reach, using it as leverage to ensure I complied with his demands. The screen glowed in the gathering darkness, illuminating his face from below in a way that emphasized his sharp features and cold eyes. I opened my purse just enough to show the envelope. "Now show me you deleting the video." The money was visible, stacks of bills neatly arranged inside the white envelope, enough to make his eyes widen slightly with greed. I closed the purse quickly, maintaining what little leverage I had. He smirked, turning his phone toward me. "It's not that simple. I have backups." He showed me the video, grainy security footage that clearly showed me tampering with Claire's food. The sight of it made my stomach drop. The reality of my actions captured undeniably on film. There I was, looking around furtively before sprinkling the crushed laxative into the sandwich. The evidence was damning, impossible to explain away. "All I want is your word that you'll leave Sakura alone," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Delete the video, take the money, and never contact either of us again." I needed to keep him talking, to buy time for the others to complete their part of the plan. Each minute he spent with me was a minute they had to get Sakura safely away. "My word?" He laughed. "Lady, my word isn't worth shut, but 10 grand? That might buy you some peace." His candid admission wasn't surprising, but the casual way he acknowledged his own untrustworthiness was chilling. He had no shame, no moral compass, just a calculated understanding of what he could get away with and what it would cost. I needed to keep him talking, give the others time to get Sakura out. "Why Claire?" I asked suddenly. Of all people, why her? The question seemed to catch him off guard, his eyebrows rising slightly in surprise at the change of subject. The cicadas grew louder in the trees around us, their rhythmic buzzing creating a natural soundtrack to our tense conversation. He looked surprised by the question. She was easy, desperate, and she hated Sakura from the start, something about stolen attention from the paramedics. He shrugged. All I had to do was listen to her bitch about work, and suddenly I had access to all the hospital gossip. When she mentioned someone might have messed with her food, I knew exactly how to get what I needed. There was no emotion in his voice as he described using Claire, just a cold assessment of how she had served his purposes. "And what's that? What do you really want?" I leaned forward slightly, genuinely curious despite myself. Understanding his motivation might help predict his next moves, might give us an advantage in protecting Sakura long-term. The bench was hard beneath me, the wood digging into my legs as I shifted my weight. His eyes hardened. "Control. Sakura thought she could leave me? Nobody leaves me." The mask mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the true nature beneath the calculated exterior. This wasn't about love or even possession. It was about power, about not allowing anyone to challenge his sense of control. The admission sent a chill down my spine despite the warm evening air. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the signal. James and the others had Sakura. They were safely away from the apartment, heading to the predetermined safe location where she could begin to rebuild her life free from fear. Relief washed through me, though I kept my expression neutral, not wanting to reveal that anything had changed. "Well," I said, standing up, "I'm afraid you're wrong about that." I felt a surge of confidence now that I knew Sakura was safe. The balance of power had shifted, though he didn't know it yet. The money in my purse stayed with me as I rose, putting distance between us. His face darkened. "What are you talking about?" Confusion gave way to suspicion as he processed my words, my changed demeanor. He took a step toward me, his body language shifting from casual arrogance to threatening in an instant. "Sakura is gone. Right now, my friends are helping her pack her things and leave your house, and you're not going to stop them." I took a step back, maintaining the distance between us. The gravel path crunched under my feet, the sound seeming unnaturally loud in the tense silence that followed my announcement. Rage contorted his features. "You bitch!" He lunged for me, but I was ready. I stepped back, pepper spray in hand. The small canister had been in my pocket all along, my fingers wrapped around it throughout our conversation. I'd hoped not to need it, but I wasn't naive enough to come unprepared. "Touch me, and I'll spray you," I warned, "and then I'll call the police and report you for assault." "How do you think your probation officer will feel about that?" The pepper spray was pointed directly at his face, my finger on the trigger, ready to deploy at the slightest provocation. My other hand held my phone, 911 already dialed and ready to send with one touch. He froze. "What?" The confusion on his face was almost comical. He clearly hadn't expected me to know about his probation, hadn't anticipated that we would have done our research. His advantage was slipping away, and he knew it. "Oh, did I forget to mention? We know you're on probation, we know about your record, and we know you're not supposed to be dating Claire with her theft conviction." I felt a surge of satisfaction as the color drained from his face. Knowledge was power, and for once we had more of it than he did. The color drained from his face. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued, amazed at how steady my voice was. "You're going to delete that video, all copies, and you're going to leave Sakura alone, forever." I kept the pepper spray aimed at his face, my stance wide and balanced in case I needed to move quickly. Or what? His attempt at bravado was undermined by the uncertainty in his voice. He was calculating odds, weighing options, trying to determine if I was bluffing. The park had grown darker as we talked, the streetlights now providing most of the illumination, casting harsh shadows across his face. "Or everything we have on you goes to your probation officer. The domestic violence, the drinking, the blackmail, everything." I didn't mention that Raymond had already made that call, that the probation violation report was already in process. Let him think he still had a choice, still had some control over the situation. For a moment I thought he might attack me anyway. His hands clenched into fists, his body tensed as though preparing to spring, then his shoulders slumped. "Fine, you win." The fight went out of him suddenly, the realization that he was outmaneuvered finally sinking in. He pulled out his phone, deleted the video, then showed me his cloud storage, deleting it there too. "Happy now?" "Not yet. Unlock your phone and give it to me." I held out my hand, not lowering the pepper spray with my other. Trust was not something he had earned, and I wasn't taking any chances that this might be another manipulation. Surprisingly, he complied. I quickly checked his email, his cloud accounts, anywhere he might have stored the video. Nothing. The search was thorough but fast. I didn't want to give him time to reconsider his cooperation. Once satisfied that all copies were truly gone, I handed the phone back. "Now we're done," I said, handing the phone back. "Stay away from Sakura, stay away from me, and find a new girlfriend, because Claire isn't good for your probation either." I turned and walked away, leaving the money in my purse. I'd been prepared to pay, but in the end, leverage was more valuable than cash. The gravel crunched under my feet as I walked away, resisting the urge to look back, to check if he was following. Show no fear, give no opening. My phone rang as I reached my car. It was James. "We got her," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "She's safe. We're at Luke's place." The relief in his voice matched my own, the tension of the past weeks finally breaking with the knowledge that Sakura was out of danger. Relief washed over me so strongly I had to lean against my car. "How is she?" My legs felt weak, the adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation suddenly draining away. The night air felt cooler now, or perhaps it was just the cold sweat of aftermath making me shiver. "Bruised, scared, but alive. She's been asking for you." His voice broke slightly on the last words, revealing how deeply affected he was by the situation. James, always the professional, the steady one, was as emotionally invested in Sakura's safety as the rest of us. 20 minutes later, I was knocking on Luke's door. Miguel opened it, his face solemn. "She's in the guest room," he said quietly, stepping aside to let me enter. The apartment was quiet, the atmosphere subdued despite the success of our plan. This wasn't a victory celebration. It was the beginning of a long healing process. I found Sakura sitting on the edge of the bed, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. When she saw me, she burst into tears. I rushed to her side, pulling her into a gentle hug. Her body felt smaller than I remembered, more fragile, as though the weeks of abuse had physically diminished her. She smelled faintly of hospital soap. They must have stopped to let her shower, to wash away the physical reminders of the place she'd been held. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "This is all my fault." The words felt inadequate, unable to convey the depth of my remorse for putting her in this position. Her tears soaked into my shirt as I held her, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She shook her head against my shoulder. "You saved me, again." Her voice was muffled against my shirt, but the words were clear enough. There was no accusation in her tone, no blame, just gratitude and relief that the nightmare was over. "I put you in danger in the first place." I couldn't accept her forgiveness so easily. Couldn't let go of the guilt that had driven me to make this right. The weight of responsibility still pressed down on me, a burden I wasn't ready to relinquish. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "He did that, not you." Her face was resolute despite the tears, her gentle eyes showing a strength I hadn't fully appreciated before. This wasn't the same Sakura who had needed our protection. This was a survivor, someone who had endured and emerged with her core intact. James appeared in the doorway. "What's the video?" His question was directed at me, his expression tense with anticipation. The others gathered behind him, waiting to hear if this final piece of the puzzle had been resolved. "Deleted," I confirmed, "and he knows we have leverage over him. I don't think he'll bother us again." The relief on their faces mirrored my own. The threat was neutralized. The danger passed. We could all breathe again, could begin to move forward. Sakura's shoulders sagged with relief. "It's really over?" The hope in her voice was tentative, as though she couldn't quite believe that the nightmare had truly ended. After so many false starts, so many moments when safety seemed within reach only to be snatched away, her caution was understandable. "It's really over," I promised. "And this time, we're doing things right. We have evidence of everything he did to you. If you want to press charges," I wanted her to know she had options, that legal recourse was available if she wanted to pursue it. The documentation we had gathered would make a compelling case. "I don't," she interrupted. "I just want to move on." Her decision was firm, her voice stronger than it had been moments before. After having her choices taken away for so long, this was her reclaiming her autonomy, deciding for herself what healing looked like. I nodded, understanding. "Then that's what we'll do." Supporting her meant respecting her decisions, even if they weren't the ones I might have made. Her healing journey was her own, and our role was to provide support without imposing our own expectations. The next few days were a blur. Luke's sister Audrey offered Sakura her spare room until she could find a new place. The apartment was in a secure building with a doorman and security cameras, practical considerations that would help Sakura feel safe as she rebuilt her life. Audrey, a social worker by profession, understood trauma and recovery in ways that made her the perfect temporary housemate. James and Miguel helped move her remaining belongings while her ex was at work. They worked efficiently, packing her clothes, books, and personal items into boxes, and loading them into Miguel's truck. They left behind anything he had given her, anything that might carry memories she didn't want to keep. It was a physical unburdening to match the emotional one, leaving behind the tangible reminders of a painful chapter. I called the hospital, explaining that Sakura had a family emergency, but would be returning soon. The administrative staff were understanding, placing her on paid leave without requiring detailed documentation. Her reputation for reliability and excellence made the unusual request easier to accommodate. People were willing to extend grace to someone who had always been so generous with her own. A week later, Sakura came back to work. She was quieter than before, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, but she was healing. The bruises faded from purple to yellow to gone, physical reminders of trauma disappearing even as the emotional scars remained. She moved with increasing confidence each day, reclaiming her space in the hospital corridors that had once been her domain. The paramedics were subtly protective, finding reasons to visit the floor when she was working, creating a buffer between her and anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions. Their presence was a comfort rather than an intrusion, a reminder that she wasn't alone, that people cared enough to stand guard while she regained her strength. Sakura gradually returned to her old self, bringing homemade lunches again, first just for herself, then for the paramedics, and finally, one day, for me. The progression was a healing metric, each step marking her return to the person she had been before, kind, generous, finding joy in caring for others. "California rolls," she said, placing the container in front of me, just like before. The container was warm from her hands, just as it had been that first time, what felt like a lifetime ago. The gesture was simple but profound, a full circle moment that signified forgiveness, healing, and the restoration of our friendship. I felt tears prick my eyes. "Sakura, the words caught in my throat, emotion making it impossible to express the depth of my gratitude and remorse. How could I possibly articulate what her forgiveness meant to me? "No more apologies," she said firmly. "We're starting fresh." Her smile was genuine this time, reaching her eyes and illuminating her face with the warmth I remembered. She had made her peace with what happened, and she was offering me the chance to do the same. As for Claire, she was furious when Sakura's ex suddenly broke up with her. The end came abruptly. A text message, his belongings removed from her apartment while she was at work. His number changed and social media accounts deleted. She was left with no closure, no explanation, just the sudden absence of someone who had worked his way into every aspect of her life. She tried spreading new rumors, but no one was listening anymore. The paramedics made sure of that, shutting her down every time she opened her mouth. They didn't have to be cruel or confrontational. They simply redirected conversations, changed subjects, or pointed out inconsistencies in her stories until her credibility was completely eroded. 2 weeks later, Claire was fired, not for spreading rumors, but for medication errors I knew she hadn't made. I suspected the paramedics had something to do with it, but I never asked. Some things were better left unknown. The hospital grapevine buzzed with the news of her departure, but the gossip quickly faded as new dramas took center stage. Claire became a cautionary tale, then a memory, then barely that. Sakura found a new apartment in a secure building with surveillance cameras and a doorman. The place was small but bright, with large windows that let in natural light and houseplants that thrived under her care. It became a sanctuary, a space that was entirely her own, decorated according to her taste with no compromises required. The paramedics took turns checking on her, bringing her groceries, making sure she was never alone for too long. Their visits were casual but consistent. A movie night here, a coffee drop-off there, small gestures that formed a safety net of normal, healthy relationships. They were careful not to overwhelm her, to give her space to breathe and rebuild at her own pace. Her smile slowly returned, brighter than ever. Not all at once, but in increments. A genuine laugh during lunch break, an excited description of a new recipe she wanted to try, a spontaneous hug when a patient's test results came back clear. Each moment was a victory, a step away from trauma and toward healing. As for me, I learned something important. Sometimes protecting someone means fighting alongside them, not making decisions for them. Sakura was stronger than I'd given her credit for. My initial instinct had been to shield her, to solve problems on her behalf without involving her in the process. But true support meant empowering her to make her own choices, to be an active participant in her own rescue, rather than a passive recipient of help. One evening, as we were leaving work together, Sakura touched my arm. "Thank you," she said simply. The hospital parking lot was quiet, the day shift having ended and the night shift already inside. The setting sun cast long shadows across the asphalt, turning the ordinary scene into something almost beautiful. "For what?" I asked, though I knew the answer. Sometimes questions are asked not for information, but for the opportunity to hear what needs to be said. I paused beside my car, keys in hand, giving her my full attention. "For not giving up on me, even when I was angry with you." Her eyes held mine, clear and direct, no longer shadowed by fear or doubt. She stood straight, confident in a way that had nothing to do with physical stature and everything to do with reclaimed personal power. I smiled, feeling the weight of guilt finally lifting from my shoulders. That's what friends do. They don't give up. The words were simple but true, a distillation of everything we had been through together. Friendship wasn't just shared lunches and pleasant conversations. It was standing firm when things got hard, finding a way forward when the path seemed impossible. She nodded, linking her arm through mine as we walked to our cars. "No, they don't, and neither do we." Her grip was firm, a physical affirmation of the bond between us. We walked in comfortable silence, two survivors of different battles who had found common ground in resilience and recovery. The hospital loomed behind us, its windows reflecting the sunset in shades of orange and gold. Tomorrow we would return, don our scrubs, and continue the work of healing others. But tonight, we celebrated our own healing, imperfect, ongoing, but real, and that was enough.